Today, we're joined by Martha Mendez, a powerhouse attorney, content creator, and proud daughter of Cuban immigrants. She's built a meaningful legal career in real estate, estate planning, and family law, while also growing an authentic presence on social media. As a mom, a businesswoman, and someone committed to her own wellness journey, Martha shares how she's learning to balance it all with purpose, vulnerability, and heart. Her story is a reminder that building your legacy doesn't mean sacrificing yourself along the way. Welcome, Marta. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to have you on because you basically embody everything that this podcast is about. You're a female entrepreneur, you are an attorney, but not necessarily this podcast being about law, but you are a mom. You seem to be doing it all. I know that that seems like a topic of discussion lately about how women we can do it all. Do we want to do it all? And I think it's important to have these conversations for other women that are coming up in, the legal industry and other industries as well in the business world. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And first and foremost, I can't do it all. I think it's impossible, to think that we can do everything. But we certainly try as women.
Yes.
And especially women who have these very high demanding professions to, at least for the outside world, to perceive us as having everything under control. But in reality, I think it's very hard. You have how many kids?
4.
You have 4. So I had 3. My 3 are women. I decided to go to law school when they were older. So I was 32 when I went back to law school.
Wow.
And it was hard, but I thought it was very important. For me, my perspective is going to be very different than everybody else, right? My perspective was I had done things kind of in a different way. I had my first daughter, when I was 17. I was in high school.
Oh my gosh.
And then I had my second daughter when I was 20. And so I couldn't really go to school, right? Like we had to work, we had to make ends meet, we had to do stuff. And so I was on like the 20-year plan at Miami-Dade. And so it took a really long time. So the one thing that was in my control was to go and be an attorney and to show my girls that if I can do it, anybody can. So there was a lot of screaming, crying, tears, wondering what the heck I'm doing.
I think I am glad that you're here because we're sort of on different sides of the parenting, journey. I'm sort of starting and you're kind of further along, I would say, because we're never going to end. This is forever. It's a lifetime commitment. And, I need to obviously prioritize my time and figure out how to, do it all or, be members of the, PTA and that's so on and so forth. And you kind of did that while going to law school. I don't know how you did that because I was a student. I was in my early 20s, but I had no other responsibilities. How did you manage your time with having young kids to be able to go to law school?
The way that I look at things is in little blocks of time, which is how I've always been able to manage. So when I was with the kids, I was with the kids. And then I'd take them, my daughter did competitive cheerleading. So then we'd go to cheerleading. And then I knew that I had X amount of hours there and I was the team mom. So I would block my time off there, but then I'd be studying. And then, I never tried to look at like what was going to happen in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because then it'd feel impossible. So I kind of broke up my time where I had to be in the moment, looking out a few days, obviously, because if not, it's impossible. But I would kind of just section it off. And, today, I kind of do the same thing. You're right. My girls are old. They're women. They're not old. It's rare. Watch a second. You're gonna judge you. I have grandbabies. So yeah, I'm at a different point, but I still use that mentality because it can be overwhelming. No matter where you're at in your journey, just being an attorney is overwhelming.
It is. Um, I am a follower of yours, and I have been seeing that you are prioritizing your wellness. How do you get that into your calendar? Because I know that you are very busy with social media, with business, and your family. How it has that been? Is that a recent addition or?
So it is a recent addition, because I always prioritized everything else.
Right.
The kids, the house, the husband, and I'm sorry he came in third, but
Came into a picture.
and work and all that. But at the end of the day, I'm not getting older, right? But I am 46. So you start to feel it in your body and you're like, oh my gosh, like I want to be able to, I love to travel. I love to do things that are adventurous and I want to be able to do that. And so I'm trying to focus on my health and, lose weight and be, stronger and all of that, because that is such a huge component to my mental health too. Because I was yet in that, yeah. I know you do the same. I see you on the bike, you do all this stuff. And
I got a message from a friend of mine who's also an attorney, who's a judge now. And she was like, there's no amount of skinny that can get me to wake up at 5 a.m. And I was like, in the beginning, sure, it was about looking a certain way, but then your body and more importantly, your mind starts to crave it. Like for that amount of time, my brain shuts off. I'm only thinking about surviving that workout. And it's so nice because for the rest of the day, you're on. You can't detach necessarily from your thoughts. So absolutely, I think it's not only for physical, but for your mental health, especially attorneys, that we tend to have the reputation that we suffer from mental health issues in our profession. So it's definitely important to balance that out.
Yeah, I think, mental health, substance abuse, all those things. And so we do have to find outlets. But I will tell you this, my trainer tells me all the time, he's like, you're going to get to a point where you're going to love it. I'm like, oh God, I don't know if I'm going to get there, but I may enjoy the way or love the way I feel. I love the way I look and, love the way that I do feel clear, when I get to the office, I'm exhausted.
Yeah, but what time are you working out?
Too early. I have not gotten up at 5:30 in the morning in a very long time. I'd say probably 15 years. And all of a sudden I'm getting up at 5:30 and I'm like, why? Why am I doing this to myself? Because it feels like the torture.
Yeah. As I mentioned before, you have been, or what seems, I guess, for me, an overnight success, right? Like I probably came to your page recently, I would say, and I'm like, wow, she's figured it out, she's doing it. But can you talk a little bit about what that journey has been like to get to where you are now? Because I think there's a lot of people that would benefit from that story.
So I can definitely tell you it's not overnight. It's something, at least a social media presence, it started 3 years ago, a little bit more than 3 years. And it's been a journey, where you're like, okay, come on, let's, I want to increase the numbers. And we look at data, right? You look at to see where you're at in numbers and you try to quantify, okay. And so what I tell people all the time is when you're starting this, you cannot just think it's going to be an overnight thing. And it's really an investment in a long-term investment. But I think it's great. Do I sometimes think, I want to be real. I want to be authentic. I want to be myself. I'm not always put together, and so I try to show the reality of who I am in social media, because I think it's hard as women to only see the best part of women on a day-to-day basis, right? You look on social, I don't know if you scroll, but I scroll.
We all scroll.
We all scroll. And I'm like, oh my God, she looks amazing. Look at that outfit. It looks great. Right. And so, but it's definitely a journey that I think it's as a female entrepreneur, attorney who's trying to scale my business, I think it's been great. But you definitely have to look at it in a long term.
And I think for the profession, this is my understanding of the legal profession, it tends to progress a little bit slower. What inspired you to incorporate social media? Because that, I think there was a lot of pushback from, I guess, the older generation of attorneys. Like, what made you decide, yeah, I'm gonna do this?
So I had a partner, somebody who was a partner in my office, and we had talked about social media for a little bit. And I kind of shot one video, and I was like, it's so cringy, whatever. And one thing led to another, and then I found Luisana, and so I started doing it with her, and so she gave me a little bit of the push that I needed, right? The like you're doing good, like a cheerleader in the background going, yeah, it's not cringy, because you feel cringe.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Who's gonna care about what I'm saying,
Right.
And so I think that was, does my partner who's older than me, sometimes he sees Luisana and he's like, oh, it's TikTok, oh, whatever. And he makes fun of it, but 3+ years later, he's
Right.
like, okay, yeah, I can dig that. I can see where, our firm has grown. And in the last year, it's grown so much that
He's pro
I was like, yeah, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, whatever.
He's like, whatever makes the people keep coming out of the door.
He sees me like this and he's like, where are you going? And I'm like, really? Go, yeah, where Nate, you're wherever.
You should know by now. Sort of in the same vein, another hot topic right now that I think every industry is sort of baffled by, it's AI. And how do you incorporate AI into your daily life as an attorney, as in your business, and where do you see that going?
So it's scary because we read all the articles that have come out of attorneys who have used AI and they've been admonished by the court. And so I do get scared. So I haven't incorporated AI into like my regular practice. But whenever I'm posting something that is not being posted by somebody who's not me, like Rosanna,
Right.
I will, I'll use AI and I'll be like, create a TikTok description. And then obviously I start filtering and narrowing and all this stuff. So I do use it from drafting a demand letter. Sometimes I'll, see how AI incorporates what I'm trying to say or edits it and stuff. So I think that AI is definitely the wave of the future, and we can either grow with it or get left behind.
Right.
So I'm trying to grow with it.
Same. I think we're all struggling on the same. We're on the same boat. And kind of moving towards the future. Where do you see everything that you're doing? Like, what are your goals for your business?
So long-term goals are to scale, to have a bigger firm and to have a practice that runs itself almost like AI, but be really nice. Yeah, right. But yeah, to scale it so that I can kind of scale back and enjoy like
What you built?
exactly, and travel and do the things that I love. I love dealing with clients. I would love to be able to deal with them on a different level.
Right.
And so that is my thought. But when you scale, it's hard. Like I'm going through that growing pain where it's, okay, do I need another attorney? Can we afford it? Or do we need another assistant? Or what do we need? And so that's kind of the struggle, right, that I'm facing now.
And then when you add people, that also adds a host of other issues, administrative concerns that you don't necessarily want to deal with. And the idea of bringing them on is to ease a lot of your troubles, not create more. Yeah, it's definitely a difficult challenge, not one that can not be overcome, but still, I understand what you're saying. And how has, I guess, your growth in social media, has that impacted other areas of your life? Not necessarily just your business, but do you see any changes in your own personal life, how you see yourself differently?
I think I've grown a little bit more into myself and not feeling I feel empowered a little bit to some extent, where I used to just gear more to being on the shyer side and not being okay speaking in front of people. But now I have a platform of thousands of people that are watching me daily. And so it kind of has helped me grow and not be timid. And, this is me. And if you like me, good. And if you don't, I'm good too. Like, keep scrolling, or keep moving along.
That's great, because I think I can only speak for myself, but like starting out, you do feel cringy. You're like, oh, I don't know. Like, should I post that? What if somebody, so and so sees it? And it prevents us from growing, really, because otherwise you're
And
not
who are you
challenged.
more concerned about seeing it?
Right.
Old people that followed you, your
I
old
think
acquaintances,
older.
or new people who are starting to follow you?
I think older, like
Yeah.
especially my older clients that don't necessarily, I mean, I don't want to box them in, but don't necessarily understand or use. I'm not going to say use because a lot of them do use it and consume social media, but there's like a disconnect there. Like they consume it, but they're like, they still feel like, I don't want my attorney to be on social media. So that's who concerns me the most. That, and also, I will always want to make sure that I post or I don't post things that I would feel self conscious of my kids watching. So that's where I definitely like, okay, I want to produce content that I like, but also that I'm proud of, and that I'm not going to be like, oh, I don't want any of my kids to see. I think that's sort of my dividing.
Yeah. So for me, it was people like acquaintances and people that I knew from before I started posting social media. And initially, I was very self conscious. I was like, I would look to see who was watching my stuff, right? And then I'd be like, oh, I can't believe, like, why? And then it's interesting because all these people who, knew me, let's say in high school or college or whatever, they started reaching out to me and they're like, hey, my mom, my dad has this situation. I'm like, okay, I don't feel as subconscious about it anymore. But I certainly don't post anything that, I don't want my kids to see. My daughter had told me when she had the baby, she was like, oh, Mom, I just don't want you posting him because you have so many people. And I was like, totally respect it. I would post, but I post a little thing on his face or whatever. And recently she's like, it's okay, Mom, you can post or whatever. I'm like, okay, I respect and, whatever the boundary is at the moment. But I feel like I was more hesitant. And I've had old clients that have known me and my partner for years. And they're like, I found you on TikTok. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, how do I change the language from Spanish to English? And I'm like, you can't. The constant is in Spanish. There's no button that you can change that. And yeah. But so yeah, I definitely, I feel like they'll appreciate it too.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because I had the same experience with a gentleman that has been washing my car for years. And he's like, what is it that you do? You're all over my TikTok feed. And I'm like, oh no. I'm like, I'm an attorney. I say it on my social media content. It's obvious. It's like, well, it's in English. I don't understand English, so I don't know. It's weird how the algorithm works and how it shoots you into everybody's feed. But sort of taking a little bit of a deviation, how do you get comfortable being on social media? Do you use any tactics? Like, did you practice? Did you seek meditation? Something that helped you kind of ease that discomfort.
I think the discomfort is always there to some extent. Something that I do is I don't really listen or watch what I have recorded. I just kind of like just post it. I know what I said in the moment. I know what I said is accurate and I'm fine with it. But I think that we're always going to be a little bit, uncomfortable. And I think that's what is good about the content is like, if it's too scripted and too whatever, people aren't going to relate. And so I want people to know me and to know that, yeah, sometimes I look like this and sometimes I look like a mess and that's okay, but I think I'm always going to be a little bit uncomfortable.
And where do you think that, I mean, we've seen the evolution of social media, we started with MySpace and then Facebook, and then do you think that we're going to continue seeing more of this type of content creation in a different platform, or is Instagram, TikTok here to stay with the TikTok brand? Who knows? Like, where do you see it going? Because you've been watching it grow.
So I think it's here to stay. I think that every generation is in a different platform. So, the older generations are in Facebook, and then we have, a different generation in Instagram, and then the young generation in TikTok. Who knows what they're going to come up with next? I mean, I assume that maybe there's going to be something that comes up, and we just have to go with the times and, see what it I have no idea what'll come from here. I don't know. I'm finally getting comfortable with Instagram and TikTok. Like, you're gonna give me something else? No.
Something else to learn. And you mentioned your daughters are older. Like when you first started posting, what was that like? Did they are like, Mom, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
They were kind of like, yeah, do it.
So my daughters, honestly, not because they're my daughters, but they're my cheerleaders. Cheerleaders, you know, they're like, yes, you can do it. Like, oh, I'll do it with you. And, you know, they go and they'll shoot whatever. And they'll, you know, I mean, I don't know if you've gone far back into my feed, but, you know, I have content with my daughters, like we're cooking together or like we go to a restaurant together and they participate. And so thankfully, they haven't felt that anything that I've posted is cringy. But I will say I started posting when they were older.
Right.
So I suspect that if I would have been posting when they were in their teen years and they were in high school, they may have been like, you know, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, they realize that there's a value, you know, and so they're cool with it.
But none of them ended up being attorneys.
No.
As of because you went to law school later in life, they could potentially.
I didn't know, but my 26-year-old is a social media manager for Sargento Cheese, and so she's in Wisconsin living her best life up there.
Yeah.
And my 28-year-old is FNP, so she's a nurse practitioner. So, you know, they're both, and it's fine because you know what it's like to be an attorney. People think that being an attorney is like watching Suits.
Yes.
Where it's like all glamour, you know, it's great. And you're in the $1 million suite of I don't know what penthouse or whatever.
Yeah.
And the reality is that you have to work really hard to be successful. And you have to work, to me, double hard as a female. You know, when I started out, and it wasn't that long ago, you know, so from a perspective of I started out and I'm walking into court with my partner back when we used to actually go to court, walking in and the bailiff comes out and he's like, you know, the court reporter can go over there. And my partner, who's white, he turns like a tomato and he's like, she's not the court reporter, she's an attorney. And so not a dig on being a court reporter, but it was kind of like, you know, why do you assume that the female is the court reporter and that, you know, it doesn't have to be one versus the other. But so there's that stigma, I find. And so we have to work double hard, you know, to become that successful. So
I think you also add a different perspective because I went solo and I've always been soloed up until this point. You started, I think, as a paralegal and you kind of worked your way through that, you know, paradigm, let's just say. How was that? Like, did you feel like that was helpful in, you know, getting the knowledge and getting comfortable to be an attorney first? Or how you feel from that experience?
So I think that you don't necessarily have to do that path to become a good attorney. But I think that for me, that was the path because I was his assistant first.
Right.
And that's when I decided to go to law school because my daughters, I mentioned earlier that my daughters were in school. And I was like, well, I did all of these things in a certain order, which is out of order. And so I wanted to show them this. And so I felt like I had a leg up in law school because I knew things that the other young attorneys or young law students didn't know. But it was hard more dealing with my partner because he initially saw me as his paralegal, not as an attorney. And so he would still come to me and be like, hey, can you type this letter for me? And I'd be like, yeah, no, that's not something an attorney does.
Right.
I'm not typing a letter for you, you know, or like, not that that's a bad thing, but it took a long time for that ceiling or that whatever to kind of meld into what it is today because it was always like a little bit of a challenge.
Do you feel like you guys struggle and you're seeing the future perhaps and him being used to how it was done in the past? And how do you work through that?
Yeah.
And have two different generations?
Yeah, I think that thankfully he's very progressive and he gets it. Like he has daughters. I mean, he's not much older than me, you know, so it's not, you know, where we're so much out of age difference, you know, but it's important that we he lets me do the things that I think are important, and he does it his way and I do it my way, and then eventually we kind of meet together. But I think that, you mentioned you're a solo, and I think that's great. I think that for me, it's good to have like a backup, like
Right.
somebody I couldn't afford when I was starting out, to go and maybe I just didn't think I could, because a lot of times we set those barriers for ourselves. So it may not have been a barrier, but I set that barrier, and it's kind of worked.
No, I think absolutely. I suffer from that when I go on vacation. I don't really necessarily have somebody that can take over all my cases, so I can't fully disconnect. So I think there's value to both perspectives. It's just a matter of, what is the best fit for you. And I'm not saying I will remain a solo forever, because ultimately I think we all kind of want to scale, or maybe not all of us. There's some attorneys that want to be solos forever,
And they're fine.
and they're fine. But the idea of, at least for me, is to scale, to be able to really, work on the vision of the business and more of the big picture things versus working in the business, or, working the business that you get. So I think there's not really one right way to do it. But it's interesting because I don't have that perspective.
So did you, when you got out of law school, you immediately went solo? Oh, okay.
I went to a mid-sized firm and I litigated for a while.
Okay.
And then as I was having kids, by my second pregnancy, I'm like, I don't want to work for anybody here because it's hard. And I knew I always wanted a big family. So not that you can't have a big family in a bigger firm, but a bigger firm, and
Yeah.
it's a struggle.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have self-imposed work goals rather than some outsider, let's say, imposing that on me and having to be physically at the law firm that I was at, because I did work for an older partner who loves, even to this day, being in the office. I do not necessarily think that you need to be in the office all the time to have good work product, because I like the flexibility of being able to work from home or being able to work from a coffee shop, wherever that may be. He didn't necessarily have that same perspective. So I knew from the onset, I was like, I know I'm going to go off on my own. I didn't think I'd be solo for this long, but it's worked up until now. We'll see how that
No, I think you get a different flexibility if you don't have that in your office. So like we had somebody in our office who she got pregnant. She started with us and she got pregnant, and she got pregnant with twins.
Oh my God.
And so we're like, oh my gosh. And so she works remote, and so like, okay, well, right now she's kind of like, well, I may need to go part-time. And we're like, cool, no problem. As long as your work gets done and whatever happens from there. So my partner is flexible. In the beginning, he was like, well, how am I going to talk to her? And I'm like, there's a phone and there's, Teams, and, there's this technology, that you can actually participate with people, versus in the older days where you kind of had to
be in person, right?
Yeah.
Stuck in an office. Yeah, I think that there are definitely improvements that need to be made in the work-life balance. But I always, when I have a tough moment, I think, okay, well, at least I can be home if my kid is sick, and I get it. I work for myself. That's definitely, a bonus of working for yourself. But I don't necessarily have to be physically there to be able to do all of the things that are required of me. Whereas women women that have been in the profession longer than I didn't have that possibility. And COVID probably, completely changed the landscape. But yeah, I think it's definitely something that I take advantage of now as a younger mom or attorney, whatever the thing may be. And where, I guess, towards the future, how do you want to, I don't know how to like phrase it, moving forward, where do you have certain social media goals that you want to continue to grow? Like what's on the horizon for Martha?
So absolutely. I try to be ambitious in, setting different goals. And sometimes my daughter, who's a social media manager, is like, Mom, you're putting too much on Luisana. Like, you need to stop. And I'm like, we need to get to 20,000 by the end of the year. And she's like, stop. Like, breathe. I'm like, yes. But I think that I wouldn't be who I am if I wasn't like that, And so I'm like, grow more, better, like, authentic, I wanted to be, real people, because, you see people and you compare. And you're like, oh yeah, look at this person. She has, 50,000 followers. And it's like, well, are they real? Are they not? And so, but I do want to scale that. I want to scale my social media. And so it's really done well for me. And so, but it's taken a long time.
Yeah.
It took about 2 years.
I think for sure we need to make that like a huge disclaimer. I think people think it's overnight, and I myself get caught in that circle too. I'm like, oh, I wish it would happen faster. Like, you're right. We compare, ourselves to other people that perhaps it did happen faster for them. But I agree. It doesn't happen fast. I want to thank you for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I learned so much from you, and you inspire me to be myself and just put myself out there regardless of the.
That's it. You have to, shoot it and forget it. So set it and forget it, shoot it and forget it. Don't even,
And listen to my voice and just move forward.
No, if you do that, you're going to be like, no,
Yeah.
just do it.
Thank you so much for joining.
Sure.